Sawate Omnes, I hope your week is going well so far. Today we are going to focus on Chapter 37 of Wheelock, which includes the conjugation of the irregular verb ao, as well as some new place and time constructions. Let's begin! Ao ire itum is an irregular verb that means to go. It is as common in Latin as the verb to go is in English, and it also has many important compounds, so it is very important that you learn to recognize its forms through memorization. Before we go through the full conjugation of the verb, there are a few irregularities in the present system that merit particular attention. First of all, following our rules for forming stems, infinitive minus re, we get a stem of long I for this verb. However, this long I becomes an E before the vowels A, O, and U in the present indicative and present subjunctive, as well as all forms of the present participle except for the nominative singular and the gerund, a concept that will be introduced in Chapter 39, so don't worry about it now. The perfect system is completely regular, except the double I usually contracts to a long I before S. It does have a passive system, but it is very rare and not presented in Wheelock, so you don't need to worry about it at all. Alright, let's do some conjugating. Let's start with the present indicative and subjunctive. Because this verb just simply means go, I will not be providing translations this time, just forms. In the present indicative, it conjugates as follows: ao in the first person singular, is in the second person singular, it in the third person singular, imus in the first person plural, itis in the second person plural, and aiunt in the third person plural. As you can see, the long I of the stem changes to E before the O in the first person singular and the U in the third person plural. Even though it seems to be a fourth conjugation based on the infinitive, in the subjunctive the theme vowel is EA, like a second conjugation, so the subjunctive conjugates as follows: eam in the first person singular, eos in the second person singular, eot in the third person singular, eamus in the first person plural, eotis in the second person plural, and aiont in the third person plural. Now let's move on to the imperfect. In the indicative, it is just the stem long I plus the imperfect endings: ebom in the first person singular, ebos in the second person singular, ebot in the third person singular, ebomus in the first person plural, ebotis in the second person plural, and ebont in the third person plural. Just like regular verbs, the imperfect subjunctive is formed by adding the personal endings to the present infinitive. So for ao ire, we get irem in the first person singular, ires in the second person singular, iret in the third person singular, iremus in the first person plural, iretis in the second person plural, and irent in the third person plural. On to the perfect in the indicative and subjunctive. The perfect stem would be I, short I, keeping in mind that double I turns into long I before S. We get EE in the first person singular, isti in the second person singular, it in the third person singular, imus in the first person plural, istis in the second person plural, and ierunt in the third person plural. The perfect subjunctive is formed just like with regular verbs, by adding the endings irim, iris, irit, etc. to the perfect stem. So for ao ire itum, we get irem in the first person singular, iris in the second person singular, irit in the third person singular, irimus in the first person plural, iritis in the second person plural, and irent in the third person plural. Just as with the perfect, the pluperfect of ao follows normal rules. The perfect stem short I plus the imperfect of sum for the indicative, and the perfect infinitive plus personal endings for the subjunctive. The indicative conjugates as follows: ieram in the first person singular, ieros in the second person singular, ierot in the third person singular, ieramus in the first person plural, ierates in the second person plural, and ieront in the third person plural. The perfect infinitive of ao, as we shall soon see, is isse, and therefore the pluperfect subjunctive is issem in the first person singular, isses in the second person singular, isset in the third person singular, issemus in the first person plural, issetis in the second person plural, and issent in the third person plural. Last but not least, we have the two tenses without subjunctives, future and future perfect. As mentioned previously, even though the infinitive indicates that it should be a fourth conjugation, for some reason it uses the future endings from a first and second conjugation with the bees. So the present So the future indicative is ibo in the first person singular, ibis in the second person singular, ibit in the third person singular, ibimus in the first person plural, ibitis in the second person plural, and ibunt in the third person plural. The future perfect also forms regularly, with the perfect stem short I plus the future of soon. Remember, this will look very similar to the perfect subjunctive, so don't get the two confused. Context clues are always helpful. The future perfect indicative conjugates as follows: iero in the first person singular, ieris in the second person singular, ierit in the third person singular, ierimus in the first person plural, ieritis in the second person plural, and ierint in the third person plural. Finally, before moving on to the new time and place constructions, a brief overview of the participles, imperatives, and infinitives of ao ire. While it does have all four participles, only two are commonly used: the present active ens with the genitive euntis, meaning going, and the future active participle iterus meaning about to go. The singular imperative is regular, just the stem of the verb, so e, and the plural is also regular in that it just adds te to the stem, for ite. Finally, the three present infinitives are also used frequently: the present active ire, the future active iterus esse, and the perfect isse. We have already learned, or have been using without having a name for it, three different place constructions. The first is the ablative of place where, which is the prepositions in or sub with the ablative. There are two examples of this on your screen. In the sentence illa urbe visus est, in illa urbe is the ablative of place where, as it tells us where the action of the verb is happening. It is translated as in that city, and the whole sentence as he was seen in that city. In the sentence nihil sub sole est novum, sub sole is the ablative of place where, because it tells us where the action of the verb is taking place. It is translated as under the sun, and the whole sentence as there is nothing new under the sun. A second place construction we have been using without having a proper name for it is the accusative of place to which. This is the prepositions in, od, or sub plus the accusative, usually with verbs of motion. There are three examples of this on your screen. In the sentence in illam urbem ebit, in illam urbem is the accusative place to which, as it tells us where the subject of the verb is going. It is translated as into the city, and the whole sentence as he will go into that city. In the sentence sub hostum hostis occidit, sub hostum is the accusative place to which, because it tells us where the subject of the verb is going. It is translated as under the spear, and the whole sentence as he fell under the spear of the enemy. Finally, in the sentence ad causam concurrit, ad causam is the accusative of place where, because it tells us where the subject of the verb is going. It is translated as to the hut, and the whole sentence as he ran to the hut. The last place construction we know is one we have already named, the ablative of place from which. This is the use of the ablative with the prepositions ab, de, or ax, and usually a verb of motion, to indicate from where the subject of the verb is coming. There is one example of this on your screen. In the sentence ex illa urbe, eat, ex illa urbe is the ablative of place from which, because it tells us where the subject of the verb is coming from. It is translated as from that city, and the whole sentence as he went out of that city. Now let's look at some new special place constructions. These special place constructions are only used with certain nouns, names of cities, towns, and small islands, as well as three special nouns, domus, hummus, and rus. These are all place constructions that do not use a preposition in Latin, but you will need to supply one in English. A lot of these will look exactly like forms of words we already know, genitives, ablatives, and accusatives in particular. This means that to figure out whether we have a place construction or just a regular use of these cases will now depend heavily on context clues. Let's look at them now. The first is the special place where. This is a surprise new case known as the locative. It is not listed in the normal declension because it usually has forms that are already in the declension. With the special nouns that are masculine or feminine in the first declension and singular, like Roma, this case is identical to the genitive singular. For all other nouns, it is identical to the ablative. There are four examples of the locative in our sample sentence. Visus est Romae ephesi Athenis et Carthaginae. As you can see, there are no prepositions, so you will have to provide the preposition at or in. The first is Romae, which is the locative of Roma. As you can see, it is identical to the genitive singular. It would be translated as at Rome. The second is ephesi, which is the locative of the masculine singular city name Ephesus. Its long I ending makes it identical to the genitive singular. It would be translated as at Ephesus. The third is Athenes, which is the ablative of Athens. Athens is a weird city name in that it is always plural, so the locative is identical to the ablative plural. It is translated as at Athens. The final locative is Carthaginae, which is identical to the ablative singular of the city name Carthago, Carthage. It is translated as at Carthage. This means that this whole sentence is translated as he was seen at Rome, Ephesus, Athens, and Carthage. The second special place construction is the special place to which. This is just the accusative of the names of cities, towns, and small islands, as well as the three special nouns, domus, hummus, and rus. 4 examples of this can be seen on your screen. As with place where, you can see that there are no prepositions. Since this is place to which, for each of these special nouns you need to supply the preposition to. The first place to which is Romam, which is the accusative of Roma. It is translated as to Rome. The second place to which is Ephesum, which is the accusative of Ephesus. It is translated as to Ephesus. The third place to which is Athenos, which is the accusative of Athens, which, recalling last slide, is always plural. It is translated as to Athens. Finally, the last place to which is Carthaginem, which is the accusative of Carthago. It is translated as to Carthage. Therefore, the whole sentence is translated as, he will go to Rome, Ephesus, Athens, and Carthage. The final special place construction is the special place from which. This is just the ablative of the names of cities, towns, and small islands, as well as the three special nouns. This is where context clues can be very helpful, as, recalling the special place where, some locatives look exactly like the ablative of the special noun. Remember, if it is a verb of motion, it is more likely a place from which than place where. There are 4 special place from which constructions in our sample sentence. Roma, the ablative of Roma, means from Rome in this instance. Epheso, the ablative of Ephesus, means from Ephesus in this sentence. Athenes, the ablative of Athens, means from Athens in this instance, not in Athens, because our verb, eat, is a verb of motion. Carthaginae, the ablative of Carthago, means from Carthage in this instance, not in Carthage, because our verb, eat, is a verb of motion. The whole sentence is translated as, he went from Rome, Ephesus, Athens, and Carthage. Let's quickly look at domus, and in conjunction with it, other special nouns, hummus and rus. Domus is an irregular feminine noun with some second declension endings and some fourth declension endings. In place constructions, it has the following forms. The locative is domi, which is translated as at home. We can see this in use in the sentence domi visus est, he was seen at home. The place to which is the accusative domum. Unlike all of the other nouns that take these special place constructions, you don't need to add to for this place to which, because in English we do not say I go to home, but I go home. This can be seen in the example sentence, domum ibit, he will go home. The final place is the place from which is the ablative domo, which can be seen in the example sentence, domo eat, he went from home. Hummus has a similar locative to domus, humi, and means on the ground. Rus has 2 possible forms for its locative. Both ruri and rure mean in the country. Now let's take a quick look at some time constructions. We already know the ablative of time when or within which is the ablative of time words used with no preposition to indicate the exact time the verb is happening or the time within which the verb is expected to happen. In translating, you must apply the preposition in, within, at, on, etc., depending on the particular noun. There are 2 examples of this construction on your screen. In the sentence aomda iit, aomda is the ablative of time. It is a time when in this instance because it tells us when the action of the verb occurred. It is translated as on the same day, and the whole sentence as he came on the same day. In the second sentence, paucis oris domum ibit, paucis oris is the ablative of time. Here it is a time within which, as it tells us the time period within which the action of the verb will happen. It is translated as within a few hours, and the whole sentence as he will go home within a few hours. See also our special locative of domum there, not locative, accusative of place to which, of domus there. Newly introduced in this chapter is the accusative of duration of time. It is defined as an accusative that indicates for how long a time period the action of the verb occurs. It is recognized as time words in the accusative. When translating into English, sometimes the preposition for is added. There are a few examples of this on your screen. In the sentence multos annos vixit, multos annos is the accusative of duration of time. It is the time word annus in the accusative. It is translated as for many years, and the whole sentence as he lived for many years. As you can see, the for in this instance is optional, as he lived many years also makes sense in English. In the second example, paucis oris domi manebit, paukas oras is the accusative of duration of time, is the accusative of the time word ora. It is translated as for a few hours, and the whole sentence as he will stay at home for a few hours. As with our previous sentence, the for can be omitted and the sentence still makes sense. He will stay home a few hours. The accusative of duration of time also has special use with the perfect passive participle of naskor, natus, nata, natum, to indicate a person's age. The cookie-cutter translation of this participle would be having been born, and with an accusative of duration of time, usually years, we can get a person's age. A few of you might have seen this in our Res Gestae sight reading. There is an example of this on your screen. Quinque et viginti annos natus. The accusative of duration of time is quinque et viginti annos, or for 25 years, which becomes having been born for 25 years. Sometimes the translation of this is simplified to at the age of, so this example would be at the age of 25. Finally, let's take a look at a sample parsing, identifying, and translating sentence. Dixisti te domum Athenis una ora rediturum esse. The main verb of this sentence is dixisti, which is a second-person singular perfect active indicative. Since it is a head verb and is followed by an infinitive, rediturum esse, we know that this verb triggers an indirect statement. The infinitive verb of this indirect statement is the future active infinitive rediturum esse, with the future active participle rediturum agreeing in gender, case, and number with the subject of the infinitive, which is te, which is a masculine accusative singular. We then have what looks like an accusative direct object of rediturum esse, which would be domum. However, since rediturum esse is a verb of motion, and domos is one of the nouns that uses special place constructions, this feminine accusative singular domum is a place to which. This means that the ablative feminine plural Athenis is a place from which, especially since our verb is one of motion. This leaves us with the ablative phrase una ora. Ora is a feminine ablative singular noun being modified by the feminine ablative singular adjective una. Since ora is a time word and in the ablative, this is an ablative of time, most likely a time within which, since the verb it is associated with is future. If we put this all together, the sentence translates as follows. You said that you would return home from Athens within 1 hour. That's all for this chapter, friends. Be sure to complete your form sentence by the end of the day Thursday and study for your quiz on Friday. Please be sure to complete this quiz by midnight on Friday. We will have our optional sight reading, as always, on Friday at 10:10 a.m. We're going to read the first 10 lines of one of my favorite poems. The translation worksheet for the weekend will also be posted on Friday at 10:10 a.m. and is due by Monday. Finally, don't forget that the chapter worksheets for this week are due by Friday, end of day. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if there is any way I can make remote learning work better for you. Valete omnes, and I look forward to seeing some, if not all of you, on Friday.